The sky above the broken Ferris wheel was a bruised purple, as though the lingering light of sunset bled into a wound that would never heal. Beyond the rusted gates of Greystone Amusement Park, tall grass swung in restless patterns, whispering of long-forgotten laughter. A single lamppost, half snapped in two, cast a weak pool of jaundiced light across the cracked asphalt. No wind stirred. The air lay heavy and stale, as though the very breath of the world had been stolen. From the moment the first foot crossed the threshold, the park reached into the chest and dragged the warmth from the lungs. The once bright carousel, its painted horses chipped and worn, stood motionless beneath coils of spider webbing thicker than rope. Mirrors, long shattered, lay strewn like broken promises across the ground. Under a half-collapsed pavilion, empty prize bins canted at odd angles, their contents, plastic trinkets and faded carnival tokens, spilling into the dust. All color had bled away, leaving everything a three-tone spectrum of rust, bone, and shadow. The path led past the carousel toward the House of Mirrors, its facade a riot of peeling paint and warped glass. Yet inside, the real horror was not the maze of reflections, but the thing that lured each wanderer deeper. Reflections in those mirrors did not match. A shoulder here was too wide, a silhouette there too tall. And always, just behind, the faintest movement of something not quite human. Each step echoed against silent walls, and the corridor bent around itself until the exit sign gleamed uselessly at your back. A low moan drifted through the corridors, winding into the chambers like black smoke. It flickered and died where the ceilings caved, sending dust motes twisting in weak shafts of moonlight. Underfoot, the tiled floor buckled, cracks as long as serpents winding between panels, dividing the path in two. Somewhere, distant but within earshot, a child's giggle cracked the solemn hush. It was bright and carefree, and so utterly out of place that the mind recoiled, resisting belief. The laughter chimed again, always just beyond vision, teasing and impossible. The main thoroughfare, once lined with food stalls, was now an open wound. Awning poles twisted their metal spines skyward. Burnt-out bulbs hung like dead fruit from bare sockets. A half-buried popcorn machine lay on its side, its glass crackling like frost. Strewn about it, kernels yellow as bone glowed faintly in the gloom. A long-forgotten concession stand bore ghostly smudges of red and blue paint, no sign of words but unmistakable in their shape. Names of snacks now vanished with the crowds. The smell of stale sugar dripped through the air, a cloying perfume impossible to escape. Beyond, the roller coaster loomed, a skeletal ridge of steel ribs rising against the dark sky. Cars hung, rusted, halfway over a hill as though abandoned in mid-scream. Tracks bent where supports gave way, curving into the abyss. To stand beneath it was to feel the weight of years press upon the skin. The rails hummed with memories of frantic thrills, bones rattling, hearts pounding, and the silent scream of those who did not survive the final plunge. The air around it felt charged, as though every rail carried an electric memory that would surge to life the moment you dared to climb aboard. At the heart of the park stood the Grand Pavilion. Its stained glass windows, once bright with kaleidoscopic patterns, now gaped like empty eyes. Doors swayed on broken hinges, scraping out a single metallic note that vibrated through the marrow. Inside, the floor was strewn with leaves and debris, and in the center, a fountain stood choked with earth and bones. Water had long since dried away, leaving behind gnarled roots and the brittle skull of some small creature. When the breeze moved through the ruin, it sighed through the broken tracery of the fountain, sounding eerily like a breath drawn and released in terror. From the darkness beyond the pavilion, something emerged. It was not a creature, but a presence, an absence molded into shape. At first, it was no more than a distortion, a wavering of the air as if heated by unseen fires. Then it took form, slender limbs that bent at impossible angles, skin stretched so tightly that every bone showed through as a ridged gash of shadow. It glided rather than walked, each movement fluid and inevitable, like ink spreading through water. Its eyes were hollows, coal-black and bottomless, burning with a hunger not meant for the living. It hovered at the threshold, as though weighing the trespasser's worth, then drifted away into deeper darkness. As the mind struggled to maintain coherence, the ground began to tremble. The roar came far off at first, a low rumble like thunder beneath the earth, but it grew louder, resonating through the bones. The coaster tracks vibrated, and the skeleton of steel shivered as if waking from a centuries-long sleep. Planks groaned, glass tinkled. Somewhere behind, the carousel wheels began to turn, scraping against seized bearings, and the horses' faded eyes glowed in the gloom. The dead laughter of 100 children, echoes trapped in the iron gears, rippled outward, filling the air with a sound that was at once sweet and grotesque. Panic rising like bile, the only impulse was forward, but the park had shifted. Paths that had been straight veered into labyrinths, stalls reshaped themselves, and familiar landmarks twisted into nightmares. Every corner brought a false refuge, an open gate that led to nowhere, a staircase that dissolved into loose earth, a corridor lined with mirrors that held no reflection at all. The horizon of the park seemed to contract, pulling the walls in closer. Every breath scraped against the throat. Through the maelstrom of corrupted space, a domed tower appeared, crowned by a broken clock face that ticked in jagged intervals. Its hands pointed to midnight, though the hour had long since passed. A single broad stair wound around the tower's core, crumbling where mortar gave way to moss and root. Climbing it was a gamble. Each step threatened collapse, but there was no choice. Behind, the shriek of metal against metal rose to a deafening pitch. Beneath, the ground convulsed, and the silhouettes of the Ferris wheel and roller coaster swayed as if caught in a gale. At the very top, the tower opened onto a catwalk that encircled the decayed clock. From there, the full panorama of the park lay revealed, and with it, its true horror. Below, motion flickered. The carousel spun. The coaster cars clattered along tracks. The Ferris wheel creaked in endless rotation. It was a grotesque tableau of life, acting out a joy that had been extinguished. In the center of it all, the fountain's empty basin began to fill with a black, viscous liquid, bubbling as though it were alive. The park was not abandoned, it was waiting. From the heights, the echoing laughter swelled into a cacophony, seeping through every joint of bone and muscle. The distorted figure from before materialized on the catwalk, its head tilting to one side in a grotesque mimic of curiosity. Beneath its hollow gaze, time stuttered. The clock tower's hand spun backward. The distant moon dipped below the horizon, and the light grew cold and blue. The pulsing beat of something not human thrummed in the air, drawing nearer. Feet frozen to the stone, the trespasser could only watch as the figure approached. It moved without hesitation, stepping around the tower's curved railing as though it belonged there. The black liquid in the fountain rippled upward, climbing over the pavilion's broken roof, coiling around the skeleton coaster, and pooling at the lumbering figure's feet. Every surface it touched withered, as though life itself recoiled. Then silence. The laughter, the wind, the trembling world, all cut to nothing. The figure paused, and in that stillness, the final truth revealed itself. The park was a wound, and every visitor scarred it deeper. Each footstep, each peal of joy, each gasp of wonder had fed it, and in turn, the park fed upon them until only memories remained. Now the wound opened at the summit, exhaling its sickness into the night. A single drop of the black liquid seeped onto the catwalk, burning through wood and stone until it hung like a drop of tar. And then another. There was no scream, for no throat remained to produce one. Only the steady drip, drip, drip as the world ended in a final oblivious hush. When dawn's first pale light crept across the horizon, the park stood silent once more. The Ferris wheel rested, the carousel lay still, and the laughter had vanished. But in the clearing grass, a single footprint pressed into the earth, a reminder that someone had come and that someone had been claimed. The gate stood open, as if waiting to welcome the next wandering soul into the feast. And beyond, the wind carried a whisper on its breath, the promise of return. Come to the channel. The full horror awaits.